Hi, thank you for joining Customer Service for Paralegals. Now, in this particular session, what we're going to discuss is legal customer service. I know this might sound foreign, especially in the legal field where a lot of times you're not trained to have exceptional customer service, trained to prepare documents, you're trained to conduct legal research, draft motions, and customer service is never discussed. I know myself, I've had training at several paralegal schools and programs, and it's never been touched on. So the purpose of this particular session is to discuss Six Sigma, which again, if this is your first session on Six Sigma, or the Six Sigma for Paralegals, what it is it's pretty much a quality improvement process or program. But it takes into account the customer. So that's why this is extremely important. I would say out of all the sessions, this one is one of the most important because it allows you, when you're working on whatever function, even when you're working on drafting motions, keeping in mind the customer, which it may seem strange to do that, but the reason why that's important is because if you keep the customer in mind in every aspect of the legal process, then when it comes time to provide status updates and to speak with the customer, you already have a jump start on information that you need to relate to the customer, your client. I'll give an example. Let's say, for instance, if you are working on legal research. The purpose of the legal research is to support the claim to assist the client with a particular legal issue. So when you're conducting legal research, if you keep the customer in mind, what that allows you to do is to recall conversations that you've had with the client regarding pertinent facts in a case. So then it allows you to start keying down and drilling down on keywords based off of your client interview. So it's important to keep the customer in mind in even aspects of a case where it may not even seem to be necessary. So what I want to discuss in this particular session is why it's important to address having a client-centered focus, a customer service mindset when you're dealing with legal processes. Now, first reason being is that the client is your customer. Just like when you go somewhere and you're purchasing a product, you're purchasing as a service, most of the time that is not the only company or that's not the only organization that can give you that particular service. Sometimes it is, but sometimes not. Even if it is, you're dealing with your electric company. Most of the time that's the only company that you can go to for that particular service, but still there is an expectation of the way that the particular individual speaks to you, how they handle particular issues, how issues are addressed and resolved. You're still looking for a certain level of satisfaction when you contact a company, even a company again like your power company. But let's take it to something a little bit more less monopolistic in a sense. Like, let's say for instance your cell phone. If you call your cell phone company because you're having issues with your service or your reception, you want the issue addressed. You don't want someone to tell you that they're going to call you back and they never return your phone calls. You don't want to be transferred to another department. You don't want to deal with that. You want to have the issue addressed. If it's not, and that occurs on several occasions, you find a different cell phone company because you expect something from that particular company. It's the same thing with a client in the legal context. They expect a level of service. So when handling cases, it's important to keep that in mind, not just because you want to be touted as a great customer service individual or company, but it's actually a rule of professional conduct. So I mentioned before the issue with the power company, where most of the times those are kind of like monopolistic situations where you have no other choice of where you're going to go to for your power. But there's still regulations and rules that they have to abide by, as far as providing a certain level of service. But the difference in that and in the legal profession, and even the difference between a cell phone company, is that they really don't have any rules that say, oh, you have to be responsive to the customer. There's really no regulatory body that's telling them that they have to do that. Well, guess what? Legal professionals do have that. There's really a customer service rule per se in the ABA model rules of professional conduct and state bars. If you look at the model rules of professional conduct in your state, look for a rule dealing with client relations or client communications. That's the customer service rule per se. It's saying that the attorney, you as the paralegal working under the attorney, have an obligation, a responsibility to the client to, one, respond promptly to their inquiries, to keep them reasonably updated. So these are responsibilities. So when I'm talking about customer service, it's not just a nicety. It's actually a requirement. And so what happens is it flows into issues where clients are then saying, okay, well, I'm not satisfied with the service. It's not just and I'm not satisfied, and you're going to know I'm not satisfied because I'm going to file a malpractice suit. I'm going to file a lawsuit. So if the stakes are a lot higher than a cell phone company or a power company, or when you go to Burger King, or when you go to a fine dining restaurant, or if you have a problem, well, let me talk to the manager. The stakes are a lot higher, where when clients are not getting, quote unquote, the customer service that they're actually obligated, they have the right to receive that. They then have also the right to file a complaint because of those particular issues. So keep in mind when in this session discussing customer service, it's not just about being cordial and being polite and providing the customer with a great level of service. It's really about staying in compliance with those model rules of professional conduct regarding client communication and client relations. So a good place to start when trying to improve your customer service dealing with clients is to locate the professional conduct rules for your particular state. You can find them on your bar association, their website. Go to the model rules of professional conduct, or just go to the ABA website, look at their model rules of professional conduct, and there you go. There's your template for customer service. Those things again relate to keeping the client reasonably informed about pertinent updates. Not everything, because it's unrealistic to keep a client updated about everything that's going on in a case. It's also unrealistic to return every single phone call of a client when that client is just a person that wants to know everything. It's just kind of like one of those type of clients that need to be babysat. The rule's not dealing with that issue. It's talking about reasonable requests. When the client wants to know, okay, well, what's the status? What happened at the hearing? What happened to this motion? Was it approved? Was it not approved? Reasonable requests. It also requires promptness to these responses. Doesn't mean a client sends a letter and then 2 weeks later or a month later they receive a response when you get to it and you go through that stash on your desk. It's saying that you have an obligation, the attorney has an obligation to promptly respond to those. But also, and a lot of legal professionals don't, and I'm going to say they don't comply with this rule. And the reason why I'm going to make this statement is based off of the statistics of studies that were done, what clients complain about. And it's usually the communication between them and the firm or the attorney. that they're not able to reach them. They're not even able to get their phone calls answered. So based off of that, I'm going to go ahead and say that attorneys, legal professionals, firm personnel, legal organization personnel are not working with the client as far as allowing them to make decisions about how the case is supposed to be handled. That is actually part of the rule dealing with client relations. What that says is when the client comes to your firm, they're not just handing their case over, their life, if you're dealing with the criminal case, their financial situation, if you're dealing with the bankruptcy or that type of case, or their business solely over to you because you have the legal expertise as the paralegal or the attorney, and they're stepping back and say, okay, take it. You don't have to tell me anything that's going on. I can't have any direction or say so within this matter. That's not what they're doing. And the rule is addressing that issue. The rule is addressing the issue that it's a collaboration. They hire your firm for your legal expertise, but that does not mean that they're putting their opinion or their input on the shelf, and not being able to do that because your firm or you as a legal professional have the legal expertise that they do not. It's saying that you as the paralegal, the attorney, working together on a case, when you're working, on these specific cases, are supposed to pretty much educate the client in a sense to where they can make an informed decision, but because they don't have the legal expertise, they don't have the legal knowledge, being able to explain the matters to them enough to where they can understand, and from that make an informed decision. They're not handing over a case for it to be handled whatever way the firm, the attorney decides that it needs to be handled, and not receiving any type of phone calls or anything back. That's not what that means, or when they're retaining a firm, and it's a problem. So as a paralegal, in order to address that issue, we're talking about Six Sigma. So how do you address that? How does Six Sigma come into play? Well, it comes into play because at the core, that's what Six Sigma is about. It's about improving quality, but the big piece of that is understanding what quality is from a customer's perspective. Customers of our clients of legal organizations are saying, I have a problem with the fact that I can't reach my attorney. I have a problem with the fact that the firm is not keeping me updated. The firm, meaning you as a paralegal, as being an employee of the firm, are not returning my phone calls. I have a problem with that. So in order to address that issue, when you apply Six Sigma within your job, even if your organization does not implement it within your job, then what you then keep in mind is that you have an obligation to keep the client informed, and it is actually just about providing good service, period. Even outside of those rules, it's an obligation, but outside of that, it's just customer service 101. A client does not, most of the time, they have choices unless they're dealing with government agencies where they have to deal with that particular agency or that institution. They have choices of where they can go. And so with that being said, not being able to give them the level of service that they're looking for, it's just like buying a car. Fitness for use is determined by, are you getting, and this is what Six Sigma is addressing, fitness for use as far as quality and then also pricing. But in this situation, we're talking about quality, and in the issue of customer service, we're talking about quality in the sense where clients are getting what they want as far as communication goes. If they're not getting that, then there's a problem there. So you address that issue by infusing with Six Sigma, which takes into perspective how the client is viewing the service that they're receiving. So speaking on fitness for use, if they've retained your firm to handle a particular case, and you're following all the motions and doing all the legal research, but every time they call, you're ignoring it. When they ask for an update, you're not giving it, or you're not doing it proactively, then can it be said that what they came to your firm, your organization for, that is being delivered? In the context of understanding what fitness for use is from a legal context, getting what you paid for, what you expected, what you're obligated to have. And again, it's an obligation on the part of a firm to be able to communicate with their clients. So keep that in mind as we go over some quick ways to be able to infuse how you handle legal matters with the Six Sigma quality improvement methodology. First, by understanding what exactly is customer service, client service, to use those words interchangeably. One, that the client is satisfied, that they're getting the level of service that they expected. If that's not being done, then it can't be said that they have that there's quality customer service being provided. So really, for myself, I've worked in other organizations that were just not legal organizations, and with that have been able to undergo customer service training, formal customer service training, where you're pretty much required to know how to effectively work with customers, meaning understanding communication styles, knowing how to work with clients when they're upset, understanding how to deal with those particular issues that in these particular service organizations like banks, they are requiring, in my case, required me as an employee to get customer service training. That it was so important that their clients were satisfied that they required training in customer service, communication, how to deal with customers effectively. And so a place to start for legal professionals is customer service is not filing documents. That's not it. It doesn't start there. It doesn't stop there. It's about understanding clients, your customer, how they communicate, cultural differences that may come into play that you may need to be aware of as far as communication styles, and being able to address those particular issues as they come up. So I'm going to talk about pretty much those main components of customer service. Communication is pretty much key. You have to be able to communicate effectively. That means you have to know the different communication styles. You have to know how to key in on that. To know when you're working with a particular client, to be able to key on what type of client are you dealing with as far as their communication style. So then what it's requiring you to do is tailor your communication style to that particular client so that you can get things done more effectively. You can have an effective client interview. You can get information that you need on a case because you've built rapport with that particular client. Now it's different as far as in a legal organization, again, because the client is coming to have something solved, which requires certain steps that are being done, like the legal research, going to trial. And a lot of those things really don't affect the client per se. There's really no, like I mentioned the example before with the cell phone. If the client's not getting reception, if the client, their satisfaction is going to be evident throughout the exchange of them receiving that particular service. Not so much so within a legal organization or legal context. The satisfaction of that client may not be known until the situation, the case is not, the outcome is not what they expected, or until they go to another legal professional and they point out something to them that was done incorrectly that they would have no clue about knowing because they don't have legal expertise. So it's a little bit, it requires a little bit more proactiveness on the part of the legal professional, because a lot of times you're not going to know unless you get a complaint whether the client, you're providing good service to the client or not. And why wait? Why wait to get a bar complaint? Why wait to get a malpractice suit? Why wait to get a call from a client cussing over the phone to know whether you're providing the appropriate level of client service? Why not infuse how you handle legal process with the customer-centric mindset? Keeping them updated when you're working on your legal task, putting in little tickler points to be able to contact the client and speak with them and give them an update. So then you don't have to wait for a phone call. You don't have to wait for a letter. You're doing it or providing them the information as you're going along. Now, I want to give a more defined definition of customer service. And customer service is a process of satisfying the customer relative to a product or service in whatever way the customer defines as meeting his or her need and having that service delivered with efficiency, understanding, and compassion. Extremely important, the last piece, compassion. When you're dealing with a lot of legal cases, you're dealing with family law, you have to have some compassion there. Dealing with some criminal law issues and some of these other really sensitive issues, it's important to have some compassion. So I'm going to briefly touch on some critical areas of customer service so that when you're handling your particular job, you can handle it from, again, this customer or client centric mindset. First, how to deal with angry customers. How to be able to diffuse situations. Because if you're dealing with most legal issues are going to be, the client's going to be very high, could be very emotional. And so it's going to require a lot of compassion and a lot of ability to be able to handle the communication in an effective way in order to be able to still get what needs to be done, get the information from that client, but in a sense, not pushing them away to where you're not able to get the information you need, or making them more upset, or whatever the case may be. You have to know how to solve problems. Before, if a client complains, a lot of when clients complain, they'll start maybe with the firm, they'll go on to a bar, then they'll go on to a malpractice suit. Or if you're in, like, let's say a organization where you're not working for a law firm, but you're working in a legal organization in a particular organization, client most of the time may start with you. You may know that they're upset. If you're working, even if your client is a business, if you have to deal with employees in another business and there's something that's occurring where there's some friction, it's best to deal with it with that particular individual before it escalates and goes on to a manager, a partner, or a CEO, whatever the case may be. So being able to handle angry customers so that you can diffuse situations is extremely important. Being able to pick up on verbal and nonverbal cues when you're speaking with customers. And then again, being able to infuse cultural intelligence, being able to know how different cultures deal with and communicate so that you're able to handle situations effectively and you're able to provide them with the level of service that they actually have a right to receive. So this was like a really general overview. I'm going to go over right now really quickly some communication, basics of a communication, and listening skills, because listening is also an important part of communicating. It's not just about speaking, but also listening. So let's go over some basics of communication just really quick. So when you're handling your job, you can handle it from a customer-centric mindset. So let's go over, and you'll have a link to a text where you can get more information about just communication styles and customer service. And then if you want to get more training on Six Sigma, is actually a way to learn how to infuse customer service in every process. So you can get more information about that also in the other sessions that are available and part of in this program. But let's talk about the communication styles. You have an aggressive communication style, you have the passive, and then you have the assertive. Now, how do you know when you're dealing with someone that's has one of these particular styles? So you can then tailor the way you communicate to them, so you can make the communication process more effective. You can have some nonverbal cues, like with the aggressive person, they may be very critical, use a loud tone of voice, just making critical comments like when they're communicating with you. Those are usually some nonverbal cues that let you know you're dealing with someone that is more of an aggressive communicator. You know, like squinting eyes. These are nonverbal cues. Squinting their eyes when you're talking, frowning, things like that. The verbal cues could be making statements like should, ought, or better. They're making like criticisms or making those type of critiques as they're speaking. Passive communication style, their nonverbal cues could be things like fidgeting, smiling and nodding within an agreement, speaking in a low volume. And then those verbal cues could be things, you know, them making statements like, you have more experience than I do, so you know, you kind of tell me what you think is best, or I don't think I can do, or this is probably going to be wrong. You know, just kind of that passive, kind of looking for need a little bit more, for lack of a better word, hand holding a little bit through the conversation as far as directing it. And then you have the assertive communication style, and this person, usually the way to be able to determine that you're dealing with someone with an assertive communication style, those nonverbal cues would be, you know, they have direct eye contact, you know, confident or relaxed posture, and they use varied ranges of speeches. So unlike the person with the aggressive and the passive, where the aggressive is more using a loud tone of voice the whole way through the conversation, and the person with the passive communication style speaks in a low volume, the assertive communicator is varying their tones, pretty much probably based off of what's being said and the information that they're delivering. And some verbal cues that you're dealing with an assertive communicator is they'll make statements like I choose to, or what are my options, or what alternatives do we have or do I have. So those are just some examples to know, you know, what type of communicator you're dealing with, so that you can tailor the way that you're communicating based off of that particular person's communication style and make the communication process go more smoothly. And so what are some of those listening skills, you know, to employ when you're working with clients and customers? First, you want to understand that there are 3 levels of listening. You have active listening, you're really engaged, you're listening, effective listening, and then you have the passive listening. And the difference with that is that with the different listening styles is when the person is communicating to you, what are you doing? Are you formulating in your mind your response to them? Are you actually listening all the way to what they're saying so that you can understand what's being said? Are you doing a mixture of the both? Of course, the one that's going to be more effective is going to be listening to be able to make sure you're understanding what they're saying, the information that they're relaying, and not just look while they're communicating, formulating in your mind what your response is going to be. Because a lot of times when that happens, there's really not two-way communication going on. It's a one-way communication. It's you telling them something or providing them some type of information, with no regard to what communication they're conveying to you, because you're not listening. You're just waiting to respond back to what you've already formulated in your mind. The more effective way is to listen, because it's a dialogue, and there's a difference in having a dialogue with someone and talking. And in the instance where you're formulating what your response is going to be, you're just talking. You're really not having a dialogue, which if you're just talking and there's no dialogue that's going on, you may miss some really important information that you need when working on a particular matter or case. So those are just some suggestions on how to determine the communication style of the person you're speaking with, and then also being able to have a dialogue and listen when the customer is speaking, so that you're able to get the information you need. You make sure that they're satisfied. If they're maybe relaying some information that they are having some problems with how something's being handled, you can pick up on that before it turns into a big issue. Or again, not just using customer service to avoid issues like malpractice suits and bar complaints, but just being able to provide a level of service that anybody wants when they're hiring a professional to help them with a legal issue or any type of issue. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. That's just a really quick, down and dirty method to being able to infuse Six Sigma into the overall legal process. Whatever you're doing, legal research, whatever you're doing, keeping a customer-centric, a client-centric mindset so that you can handle cases more effectively, and actually it will help you be more efficient, because if you're listening to the client when you're doing things like legal research, you'll remember, oh yeah, she said or he said this, let me look up the statute regarding this, because you've listened. And so it actually makes your job more easier, and it makes it more efficient in other areas. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Hope this session was useful, and just as a takeaway, a synopsis, just something that you can just walk away with this whole session, is understanding that customer service is not just a nicety, it's actually an obligation. So keeping that in mind when you're handling your job as a paralegal. With that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I hope this session was useful.